Today is part 1 of a multi-part series where I'll be analyzing how to play white against the Sicilian Defence. For anyone who doesn't know, the moves start with e4 and then c5. This is the Sicilian. Now we play the move knight f3, and now black has many different options. In today's video, we're going to exclusively look at how to play against second move d6. In future videos, we're going to look at other moves. The most popular move here is d4, and there are other options as well, but I like move c3. Now black plays knight f6, a logical developing move, developing the knight and attacking the pawn on e4. And now we play bishop d3. We actually don't have to defend the pawn on e4 if we play a random move like h3. Black cannot take on e4. Pause the video for a second and figure out why this would be a big mistake. We play the move queen a4 check, forking the king and the knight, and we win. So black cannot take the pawn, but either way, bishop d3 is a useful move because we want to put our bishop on c2. So knight c6, good developing move. Now bishop c2. In this resulting position, black has many options to choose from. Let's start off by looking at what happens if black plays g6, a very logical move, with a plan of developing the bishop to g7 and castling. So we castle, bishop g7, and now a nice prophylactic move h3, preventing the bishop from ever going to g4 and pinning the knight to our queen. Black castles, we get d4 in the center, trades, and now let's start off and look at what happens if black plays the move e5, playing in the center. Now we go d5, knight b4, bishop b3. Now black will play the move a5, knight c3, defending the pawn on e4, d5, bishop e3, a4. Now we play the move a3, attacking the knight on b4. Black takes our bishop on b3. We take the knight. Now after an exchange of rooks, we're doing quite well in this position because this pawn on b3 is really weak. Soon we're going to go knight to 2 and then take the free pawn. So on move 14, black is better off playing the move knight a6 instead of taking our bishop. Now we drop down to c2, queen a5, bishop d3, bishop d7, defending the pawn on b5, which was being attacked. Now rook e1, just developing a rook a little bit. Rook c8, now knight d2. And we're sort of preventing any of black's plans on the queen side. If black ever plays b4, then the pawn on a4 becomes weak. And we also have the nice c4 square for our knight. So it's a little bit difficult for black to do anything. And in the future, maybe we'll try to attack this pawn on b5, maybe go queen e2. So let's look at move 12. Black goes bishop d7. Now we go bishop e3, developing our bishop, knight e6, knight d2, preparing to place the knight on c4 sometime in the future. Rook c8, bishop a4, exchanging light squared bishops, takes. And now we got the knight to c4, which is a great square for the knight. Currently we're attacking the pawn on d6, so this looks pretty good. Let's go back and see something else. Move 11, what happens if black takes the hanging pawn on e4? Now we play the move queen e1, targeting both knights, and there's no way black can save them both, although knight takes f2 is an interesting move. And after we take, knight d3, and black can get some counterplay. We go queen e3, e4 is a powerful move, opening up this bishop. We take, takes, now black gets bishop takes b2, forking both our rooks. So after knight d2, bishop f5, a little intermediate move, queen f4, queen f6. Black doesn't have to rush, neither of our rooks are going anywhere. Rook b1, bishop b1, so black was able to get the exchange. Now we trade queens, take the bishop. There were a few tactics that led us here, and it was a bit complicated, but in this resulting position, I think we're doing pretty reasonably. We have 3 minor pieces and a rook against 2 rooks, a bishop, and 2 extra pawns. So the material is roughly balanced, and I think we're pretty well coordinated. In the future, we might go knight e4 on the central square, and I think we're doing pretty reasonably. So let's look at something else. Let's look at what happens if black plays move 9 d5 instead. Now we play e5, knight e4, knight c3, trading off this central knight. Takes, takes. Now we have a little pawn chain. Knight a5, knight h4, a good move. We're setting up the plan of pushing f4 and then f5 and launching a future attack on the king side. So black can try to prevent it by playing e6 and attacking our knight. In this case, we just retreat to f3. And even though we wasted some time, it's still not worth it for black because this bishop is now blocked behind this pawn, which is not very comfortable. So instead of e6, black is better off playing the move bishop d7, just developing the bishop. f4, continuing our plan. Rook c8, targeting the pawn on c3. But we ignore it. f5. Attacking the king is a bigger priority than defending this pawn on c3. Black takes anyway. Bishop d2, threatening the rook. Rook c4. We take on g6. H takes g6. Now we have a powerful move. Rook takes f7. Brute force. Just opening everything up and going for a quick attack on the king side. Takes. Bishop takes g6, threatening the rook. And planning to go queen h5 next move. Queen b6. Threatening the pawn on d4 with check, so we have to spend one move defending with bishop e3. Now black plays rook c6. Wants to get rid of this bishop. So we have to take on f7. Takes. Queen h5 check. King g8. And now we bring our rook into the attack. Rook f1. Now black plays a move like knight c4, attacking our bishop, and in this resulting position, we have nothing better than repeating the position and doing a draw. Unfortunately, our attack didn't lead to victory, but it was still an exciting line. So let's look at something else. Instead of move 9 d5, let's see what happens if black goes knight b4, immediately trying to trade the knight for our bishop. So we don't allow it. Now black plays d5. If knight takes e4, once again we have the move queen e1, threatening both knights. So d5, e5, knight e4, knight c3, bishop f5. Now we go knight h4, attacking the bishop, bishop e6. Now we have a nice move knight e2. Our plan is either to put our knight on f4 and attack the bishop, or go f3 and attack this knight, which is currently trapped. There's no moves for the knight, so once we go f3, the knight will be able to take the knight next move. So black plays g5, attacking our knight. We could retreat, but we'd rather play f3. Takes, takes, takes. Now rook f4, developing our rook into an active square, threatening both these pawns. Black exchanges on d3, we take with the queen, knight d5, and now we take on h4. And in this resulting position, we're doing really well. This pawn on e4 is very weak, so we're probably going to be able to take it in the future. And also the black king is not so safe. There's no pawn on g6. That would otherwise be a good defender, so now the whole g file is open. So in the future, we might be able to launch an attack. So let's look at some other option. Maybe black has something better. I think we're pretty good against move 5 g6. We know the ideas, so let's look at what happens if black tries another move. How about e5? Another logical move. Making it more difficult for us to get d4. And also planning to go bishop e7 and castle short. So we castle, bishop e7. Now, before we go for d4, once again we play the prophylactic move h3, preventing bishop g4. This is quite thematic. Oftentimes we don't want to allow this bishop to go to g4 in these variations. Black castles, we get d4. Takes, 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 takes. d5, playing the center. Black can also go knight b4. We go for a bishop, but it's not a big deal. We just go knight c3. Black takes our bishop, we take back. Bishop d7, bishop f4. Putting pressure on the weak pawn on d6. Black plays a move like rook e8. Now we bring our rook to d1. And we're doing very well here, despite the fact that black has the two bishops. They're both fairly passive, especially the one on e7. And this pawn on d6 is quite weak, so this is pretty good. Let's look what happens. Instead of move 10 knight b4, black plays d5. We take on c6, takes, take on d5, takes, bishop e3, just standard developing moves, nothing too special. Knight e4, knight c3, developing our knight and offering a trade. Takes, takes, bishop a6, developing the bishop with tempo. So we have to move a rook, rook c8, now bishop d4, putting our bishop on the central square. And I think we're doing okay here. Both our bishops have nice prospects along these diagonals, and in the future, maybe we'll also bring our queen and hopefully launch an attack on the black king. So I think this is alright. Let's see some other variation. Now let's look at the move e6. Where we play d4, playing the center. Takes, takes, bishop e7, knight c3. We both castle. e5, playing the center. We go d5, attacking the knight. Knight b4, bishop b1. It might look pretty bad that our bishop is all the way on the back on b1, although this is only temporary. After a5, we go a3, hitting the knight, and sooner or later we're going to develop our bishop back to d3. Knight a6, we go h3, once again preventing bishop g4. So bishop d7 instead, bishop e3, developing the bishop, and next move we're going to develop the other bishop on d3. So I think we're doing pretty well here. This bishop on e7 is really passive. Now let's look at move 5, bishop g4. In many variations that we saw, we took the step to prevent the bishop from going to g4 with h3. So here black plays bishop g4 before we have time to prevent it. So we go d3. If we play two steps and go for d4 immediately, it's a mistake because black takes, takes, and now e5, and our center isn't very stable. If, for example, d5, black gets to plant this knight on this beautiful outpost on d4, and our knight is pinned to our queen on this diagonal, so this is not so great for us. So that's why instead of d4, we just go one step to d3. e6, knight bd2, developing the knight, and also preparing to potentially go knight f1 and knight g3 in the future, a little maneuver. Bishop e7, h3, attacking the bishop, bishop h5. Now, knight f1, we're going to g3. Now d5. Another option is knight d7. Now we go knight g3, attacking the bishop, bishop g6, d4, takes, takes. We both castle, e5. Now bishop e3, just developing our pieces. Bishop f6, d5, attacking the knight, knight b4. Once again, we go bishop e1, but we understand that this isn't a problem, that our bishop is all the way on the back rank because it's only temporary. Knight a6, a3, queen b8. The idea of queen b8 is to free the square on d8 so the bishop can maneuver to d8 and then b6 and trade for our bishop on e3. Either way, we go b4, expanding and gaining some space on the queen side. Bishop d8, queen d2, bishop b6. So black was successful in this little plan and managed to exchange bishops, but doesn't solve all of black's issues. In this resulting position, we're doing quite well. We have some more space on the queen's side, and our pieces are fairly well placed. Maybe we'll put a rook on this open c file. So I think we're doing pretty well here. So let's see what happens if instead of move knight d7, black goes d5, immediately playing in the center. So we go knight g3, hitting the bishop, bishop g6, knight h4, attacking the bishop again, queen c7. We castle. There's no rush to take the bishop on g6 because it can't go anywhere. Black castles long. Now the threat is to take on e4 because we can't take back because of this pin. So we have to move our queen out of the way with queen e2, rook e8, rook e1, preparing to play e5. So black prevents it with bishop d6. Finally, we take the bishop on g6, takes. Now we can play the move bishop a4, little pin. Now black can take on g3. We take back and win a pawn with queen takes g3. Now we play the move e5, attacking the knight. Now black could go knight d7, although there's a powerful move rook h8. Immediately threaten to take this pawn on h3 and launch a quick attack on our king. So if we take the knight, black takes on h3. Now the threat is to go rook h8 and then mate. Although we do have a way of defending, we go bishop f4, a strong move, threatening the queen and forcing the queen off this pin. Queen takes f4. If black ignores us and goes rook h8 anyway, we just take the free queen. Rook h1 is not mate because of king f2. So that would be a disaster. Black has to react and take our bishop. Now we're able to take the rook. Black takes our bishop on a4. Now we take this pawn on g7. Move like queen f4 makes sense, trying to give a check on g3. So rook f1, queen g3, we trade queens, f5. And even though we have this passed pawn on the 7th rank, it's actually a weakness, not an asset. And that is because we have no way of defending the pawn and supporting it. Instead, it's simply a weakness. Black will go rook g8 and take the free pawn. So this position isn't so great. On move 19, we actually have a better option. We can play the intermediate move, bishop takes c6, before taking the knight. You may already realize the reasoning for it. If not, you'll see in a moment. If black takes on c6, we take the knight on f6, rook h3, bishop f4, queen takes f4, g takes h3. May appear like this is the exact same thing as we saw previously, but the big difference is now there's no bishop on a4 for the black queen to capture. So here we're just up a rook. So that was the reason why we traded the bishop on c6. It was a very deep move, thinking very far ahead. Although, still not easy. On move 19, black has a better response. Rook takes h3 immediately, instead of taking our bishop. Of course, the threat is once again to go rook h8 and checkmate. And once again, same idea, bishop f4. The ideas are repeating themselves. Queen takes f4. We take on h3. Knight h5. If black takes our bishop, we take the knight. And once again, we're up a rook. So knight h5. And now, temporarily, we're up a rook. Although, unfortunately, this bishop on c6 is trapped. There's no escape. If we go to a4, black just takes. So we have to go to b5. Now, black attacks us, and we have no moves. But, at the very least, we can sacrifice the bishop with the intention of opening up the black king. Now there's less pawns near the king. So we go d4, opening up and threatening to take on a6 with check. c4, closing it up. Now, we switch gears and play queen g4, going for the endgame, trying to trade queens, because in this position we are up a little bit of material. We have a rook against a knight and a pawn, so once we trade off queens, we're going to be doing pretty well in this endgame. I think we can conclude the position here. I'd be very happy to play this position with white. And I think this covers this video. If you'd like to purchase the PGN file for this opening, just go to my website, chessdaily.co. Link in description.